Lindsay, welcome to Disabled and Proud. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. It's going to be such a fun conversation. I'm honestly really, like, as I've said off mic and off screen and whatever, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I think this is one topic I've not delved into and I'm really excited to learn a bit more about it.
No, I think epilepsy is just not something that, I mean, it's not something that's seen unless you're having a seizure, and so to begin with. And so it's one that is often like an invisible disability until it's not.
Yeah.
And so because of that, sometimes you have to like come out about your epilepsy or like in a way.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll just dive in. So I ask every single person because I think it's super important to ask people how they refer to their disability because everybody's so individual. And I think getting that point across is invaluable for people. So, Lindsay, how do you refer to your disability?
I mean, I say I have epilepsy, but I think it's changed over time when that took me a while to say that I had epilepsy. I think I was afraid to say that. So I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 16. I first started having seizures when I was 16. So I only get seizures in my sleep. Everybody with, I mean, every disability is different, obviously. And even if you have the same diagnosis, it manifests differently, and that's like kind of something that's so cool about it, and it's something that's so interesting. And so for me, I only get seizures in my sleep. I started having seizures when I was 16, and after a little while, so it took a while to get diagnosed because nobody saw them. And then I was really afraid of that. I lost a lot of friends at first as well. Other people were really afraid of that. So for the longest time, I said I had a seizure disorder, which for some reason was better than epilepsy. I don't really know. But I think it took a while to say I had epilepsy and like be like, yeah, I have epilepsy. Like and turn that from even just saying it and then saying it in a positive way as well.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is you said like you have seizures in the nighttime, like when you're asleep. And so that must have been really difficult to go through when you didn't know what was going on, and particularly being able to like tell someone, hey, like something's not quite right with my sleep, but I don't know what it is. How did you even go down the route of trying to get a diagnosis, or even knowing that actually something was maybe like a little bit amiss and like further investigation needed to happen?
Yeah, so I'll describe kind of the feeling that happened.
If you could.
So basically for some people there's many different types of seizures, and the seizure that I have is kind of like the grand mal, the big one, the stereotypical one. And but before that, some people get like an aura, which if anybody's ever had a migraine, it's a similar thing. So with a migraine, you might see like rainbow colors before you get your headache, and with a seizure, you might get some sort of aura. And but everybody's aura is different. So if you go on Reddit, there's some really cool ones that people share. So there's like some people get an impending sense of doom for an entire week. That would suck. Some people smell hair, burning hair. Some people do see rainbow colors. So everybody's is different. And then the seizure will happen. That aura is actually a different type of seizure. So it's a seizure triggering a seizure.
Wow.
I've only learned that recently. Fascinating. My aura is a falling sensation in my sleep. And it's horrible. I'm not gonna lie. Like, so it's kind of like if you ever have that falling feeling when you're sleeping and you like kind of twitch and wake up. It's like that, but it doesn't stop. So it feels like you're falling through your bed, and it's terrifying. So then that wakes me up, and then the seizure will knock me out again. So that's kind of like what happens, and then after that I'm awake again. If it's gone through its full cycle, which at the moment I'm on enough medication that I get just the aura, so I don't get the second half.
Yeah.
So then I might have like bit through my tongue, or like fallen off the bed or something like that. So when it first started happening, I was like, God, I have this banging headache the next day. And like, I had this really weird falling feeling in my sleep. Have you ever had this falling feeling? And I'd describe what was happening. People would say, no, that I've never had that.
Yeah, and I bet you felt great after that, like fantastic.
Yeah, I'd wake up because I'd bite my tongue, and like because some, like you often do when you have a seizure, and your tongue would be bleeding. So I'd be like, God, there's like blood on my shirt, and I have this falling feeling when I'm sleeping. And like, does that just ever happen to you in your sleep?
Yeah.
And people would say, no, that's really weird. And it would happen once a month about for me. So I'd be like, oh, okay, doesn't happen to you, weird, and I'd just move on with my life.
Yeah.
I was 16. I didn't think of going to the doctor.
I love it so much because it just goes to show that actually sometimes really big things you can just sweep them under the carpet and be like, yeah, well, maybe it's just a me thing, like bodies are all different.
Yeah. I was like, I just have this really bad headache, and like, you know, I don't feel great, but like, yeah, exactly, maybe I just have some weird sleep sometimes, and maybe it was a weird dream. It turns out it's not, but like, it's really funny looking back on that. And like, I'd have sleepovers at friends' houses, and they'd be like, you're making some really weird noises in your sleep last night, and I'd be like, yeah, I had this weird falling feeling, and like this weird I woke up, and now I just have this horrible headache, and I feel really out of it, and like I'd be kind of slurring my words, because the post-ictal phase, which is like after the seizure, sometimes it lasts different periods of time, but that's where I think one of the biggest misconceptions with epilepsy and seizures is that you have the seizure and you're kind of done with it, but it impacts you're not. It impacts you throughout, like chronically, and so after that, I mean, that could be a week's worth of like I'm just kind of like brain fog or being out of it, or, so yeah, I'd just be kind of like walking on a cloud, and like, it wasn't until I stayed the night at one friend's house that their whole like family had been trained in like seizure awareness and epilepsy awareness, because her sister's boyfriend had really severe like epilepsy, and he had really frequent seizures, and so I was sleeping over there, and I had one of my fun seizures in my sleep, and this one so she had noticed it and known what it was and hollered for her mom. They called the paramedics, and I, in my like 3 a.m. when it was all through, and I woke up and I was quite out of it, because seizures like an electrical reaction in your brain. There's this paramedic speaking to me, Lindsey, wake up, you just had a seizure. And I look over and I see that it's 3 a.m. and I say, no, I didn't. You have the wrong person. Let me go back to sleep. And I say, no, we got to take you to the emergency room. We got to take you into the hospital. No, I want to go back to sleep. And fine, I'll go with you just because I respect you and you're a paramedic.
But you have the authority in this situation, which I'm really annoyed about, but actually maybe you've got something interesting to say.
So I had to go in the ambulance with them, and that was kind of how it had started. I remember sitting in the hospital and giving me these like really big pills, and I'd hardly been able to like take like paracetamol at the time. Like, and I was like, it felt like taking horse pills. And And I remember in the ambulance on the way there, like I was like, "Ooh, what's that? What's that?" And I was like so curious. And the guy was clearly very annoyed, maybe the end of like his night shift or something. And he was just like, "You're not gonna remember any of this anyways." He was so rude to me.
Oh my gosh.
It's probably because he said that I remember it.
Yeah, that's so true. But also for you to have that experience like away from home, where you're not like with your direct family or like or whoever you live with, and it's not necessarily like your like quote unquote safe space, to then suddenly be woken up by, or woken up, probably not the correct terminology,
Yeah.
but that's how what it felt like for you to be like faced with a paramedic being like, "Babes, you've just had a seizure," and like you not knowing that you have seizures, and then being taken to hospital. That must have been quite an experience for you, because at that point in time it's almost like that's when everything changes.
Yeah.
Because suddenly there's like medical intervention where there hasn't been before, and that must have been like quite a scary time. And especially at 16, like 16, such a formative age for anyone. And I don't care what anyone says, you genuinely couldn't pay me enough to go back and be a teenager. Like I'm really enjoying not being a teenager. It's super fun. Like you have your own money, you have your own life. It's great. But at that point in time, to have that experience away from home, away from what's familiar to you, yeah, that must have been quite scary.
Yeah, it was, I think, like when I so like my dad met me there, and I remember so clearly that day, even though normally I don't remember the day after a seizure at all.
Yeah.
Like I remember we went out for breakfast. I remember we had lemon ricotta pancakes. And
they sound great.
It's delicious. I remember being completely out of it, but I remember these like details so much because it was like such a like clear day for me of like my driver's license got taken away. I had only been driving for like 6 months at that time, and that like I had just basically gotten my independence, and as a 16-year-old I'm not allowed to, like you go to parties as a teenager, and I'm not allowed to like drink or stay up late anymore, and I have to like totally shift my lifestyle, and now I have to go on all these like medications that have horrible side effects, and I'm allergic to one left and right, and it's like and suddenly, especially that friend is terrified, and so it wasn't actually until a couple of years ago we got in touch again during so I don't know how many years later, like almost like 8 years later, something. We it's not that we completely lost touch, because we were still at school together, but we just weren't as close as we were before. And it was like 8 years later we got in touch, and she apologized. She was like, "Look, I was so scared." And I didn't really know what to do. Like I just hollered to my mom, and it was kind of scary seeing your best friend like that. And I lost a lot of friends because they just were really scared and didn't know how to react to disability in general, and to how someone's life can change, and how to accommodate someone. And so I made totally new friends that like knew me as this basically. And it was like people who, I don't know, they were kind of like because my life was always, I was like the nerdy kid and also like the super social kid, so that I just made friends with the nerdy friends, basically, and the teachers and stuff. And so it was definitely like it was a really hard time, especially with, I think, the medication side effects and all the being like, I fell asleep in class every day, with whether it was because the seizure or the medication side effects. It's hard to intertwine the two. And so it took a while to get to where I am now, I'd say.
And I think that's a really important like message isn't the right word, I don't really know, but I think it's really important to say that it's not something that's you know, fixed overnight, because as you say, like medication, so many different side effects, allergic to one that's better than the next, but you know, it doesn't work for you because for whatever reason. And I think when you do have a disability that is largely controlled by medication, it's difficult, and it takes time to find your footing, because everybody's body is so different. Like your chemical makeup is so individual to you, that what works really well for someone that you're really close to is probably not going to work that well for you, just because of the chemical makeup in our bodies. And I always think about, so I don't have to take any medication for my disability. Obviously mine's very physical, it's just there, like there's nothing they can do about it. It's not like I can take a magic pill and it's going to grow back tomorrow. But I always think about what it would be like if I did have to take medication, because I'm really forgetful sometimes. Like the idea of taking tablets every day, for me, like I struggle with vitamins. So I always think, like, for people who do have to take medication, I'm like, oh my God, like, well done you, because I wouldn't remember. Like I'd be like, what's this for? Oh yeah, like, oh no. And it must have been such a shift for you, because as you said, like 1 minute you're driving, you're free to go wherever you want to go, and then the next you can't, because your license has been taken away, and it's nothing that you could do to bring it back.
No, and I think, like, I mean, they would say, like, look, if your seizures are controlled, then you can get this back. You're able to do this, and it's almost like they dangle a carrot in front of you. And I mean, so I do have my license now, because I've only ever had my seizures in my sleep, and I'm not gonna sleep at the wheel.
Yeah.
But like a lot of people with epilepsy don't. And like there's a lot of other things as well, like even if you're like, a lot of people with epilepsy won't don't drink, or don't stay out late, and have to be really controlled with, I mean, they might not even be able to take like a bath or something, because they might have to have, or unless somebody's in the room, and there's a total, like, it's this concept of independence that and where do you find that? And I think, like, especially in the beginning, there was a lot of like, why me?
Of course.
Like, or what's wrong with my brain? And is there another way? Is there a natural way that I can like do, like instead of all these medications, because these seem to suck. But also, I don't want to hear from all those like people trying to just tell me to smoke weed, because like I can figure it out on my own. So it's I think it's definitely like a journey of both, like accepting the medication, accepting your own disability, and like I still, as I mentioned, like so I don't get the big seizures. I'm working on the falling feeling. I get sometimes I get a little bit of a falling feeling. I'm at the moment on one medication, which is like a really big thing, like one really big deal for me, because I was previously on like multiple different ones, which we like to call like a medication cocktail. And the other things, like I was about to say, no offense to the neurologists out there, but maybe offense to the they're not the most empathetic people when you go to them, because they're really about the, okay, let's fix the symptoms, and not seeing how it really is like impacting your quality of life, I guess. And maybe your quality of life in terms of the symptomatic quality of life, but I guess how you feel about things, and like your independence or your emotions and things like that. And so finding a good neurologist that will listen to you is hard.
And also, I think probably because it's neurology, and when you think about the brain, it very much then falls under the medical model of disability, right? Is that there is something to be fixed here. And because you do have to take medication to control is not the right word, but to manage what's going to happen, there is that element of there is something that needs to be fixed here, and that is like a neurologist's job. Like their job is to look at the brain and almost be like incredibly black and white about this is right, this is wrong, this will work, this won't work, and rather than having that like holistic approach that, you know, people would maybe rather, I don't know, I'm not epileptic so I can't really speak about this, but I think if it was me, I would rather have a more holistic approach to how my medication would be managed, or lifestyle, or things like that, because as you said, like quality of life is so important. But if you're working with someone who that's not really their primary focus is like, right, let's get this part of the brain to light up rather than this part, like you're never going to be like symbiotic, it's never going to happen.
Well, it's exactly, and it's about that balance, right? Of course, seizures are not, like, seizures can be dangerous, and like can have impacts on your brain and and also impacts on your surroundings and your health. So like you want to manage the seizures, but at the same time, like there's side effects to medications, and so it's definitely a tricky balance. I felt really valid. This is going to sound a bit wild, but so I said that my seizures happen at night. They happen about once a month, and we don't think they're hormonal. We've tried tracking them and we can't see, but I've only ever had male neurologists, so like who knows.
Yeah, we'll leave that there.
Not enough research there as well, in women's health, in that way. I think this is what's going to sound the crazy bit, is I get them around my seizures around the full moon. And so I only noticed that recently in the last couple of years, and I was like, tracked it back in time. Somebody like said an off comment, and I was like, ha ha ha, funny, like one of these off comments about epilepsy and your dog or something. And I was like, wait a second, I think that's actually, and I tracked it back and I'm like, it kind of is the pattern of mine. And I started tracking it, and the last appointment I had with my neurologist, I told him, I was like, this is going to sound crazy, but I think my seizures happen around the full moon. And he was like, actually, like, there's been some research, there's no research that says that, but epilepsy is about a pattern and it doesn't generally break the pattern. So if that's your pattern, that's your pattern. And that was actually the most validating thing that he could have said, because although he wasn't like because he could have said the research says no, and that's a silly idea, out the window. But he said, if that's your pattern, that's your pattern. That felt so validating.
And particularly like for someone who is, you know, like, and I'm being incredibly general here, particularly for people who work in the medical profession who tend to be quite black and white, that's a massive step in the right direction for them to even like recognize that there's a pattern that doesn't necessarily fit into their square box. You know? That's huge.
Absolutely. And because I think, and that's the thing with epilepsy, is like there's so many different things that can trigger people. Not like the big stereotype is the flashing lights, but it's like, I mean, most people actually don't have a seizure from flashing lights. There's lots of different things. Flashing lights can cause seizures for some people, but there's lots of different things that can. I spoke to someone and they said that looking at barcodes will trigger a seizure for them. And at signs. That sounds, fortunately, they've been able to find a medication that works for them. But that sounds really challenging in the world we live in. If barcodes, which are everywhere, and that's what triggers something in your brain to light up.
I find this fascinating because our brains are also wired so completely differently, whether you're neurodiverse, whether you're like a not neurodiverse, like the way that we're all wired is just so individual. And like you said, I think, you know, like you must rely, again, total assumption, but you must rely quite heavily on patterns to see where you are and what you're doing and how it's going, and with medication, and it's just a whole minefield of other things that you've got to think about, as well as everything outside of like your life. So for example, like, what was it like for you going to college with this information, knowing that you were epileptic?
Yeah, when I went off to university, it was it was really interesting because I had to really fight for getting a bottom bunk, and like to get any sort of accommodation. And the one that I like that the baseline that I needed, like the absolute bare minimum, was a bottom bunk, because I was living on in-campus dorms, and in the US, you're sharing a room with people, and I got put in this like overflow housing, which meant they crammed more people into a smaller area, so there was 3 to a room.
Love that.
It was great. It was like a room that was supposed to have 1 person, and they were like, let's put 3 in, why not?
Woohoo! Bonding.
So the absolute bare minimum I need is just like, I need a bottom bunk, so just in case I don't fall off the top. That's it.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to give it to me. They said, well, you kind of applied late. You should have put your preferences in earlier. And I was like, well, it was just something I didn't think about until you gave me a top bunk. It just didn't cross my mind. I just hadn't thought about it. And they said, well, we already assigned the bunk beds. Maybe you should talk to your roommate. And I'm like, well, what if I get someone who really doesn't like me? And what if they also have a reason that they need a bottom bunk? Then like, this is not going to work out. I had to like trek across in person and like bring a giant stack of paperwork and written note from my neurologist to say she needs a bottom bunk, and you need to accommodate her. And then they gave it to me, and so that was like, welcome to university. This is how it's gonna be.
It's so wild that you had to fight for something, and like you said, bare minimum, like literally bare minimum, so that you didn't hurt yourself. That you had to go and be like, here is all my paperwork to prove I am what I say I am. Here you fucking go.
Yeah,
give me the bottom bunk. Like, that is so. This is why we like these conversations need to be had, because people are fighting for the bare minimum when it should just be a given.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, because you can't see it. Like, you can't be like, look, she has epilepsy. Like, unless, even if I have a seizure out in public, you're still not gonna be like, look, she has epilepsy, because like a lot of people might have one-off seizures in their lifetime, and that might not be epilepsy. So that, like, you still, they might need other accommodations. There might be different things that are happening. So it's not something you can just point at and see. So yeah, it was literally fighting for the bare minimum. I tried to ask for, hey, if I have a seizure, can I have like if I have a seizure, right, like when it's upcoming to an assignment or a test, can I have like an extension, because I'm going to be out of it. I'm just not going to be with it. They didn't give it to me. They said there was not enough proof, because I'm functioning most of the time. And my seizures are not regular enough for them to give it to them. And I was like, I think they really just wanted somebody having like a seizure once a week, a seizure every day, during the day. But because I was not that stereotype, which is not most people, then they didn't want to give it to me. So what I had to do was, I just, like, kind of similar what I did in the last like couple of years of high school, was just kind of become close to the professors and tell them, hey, I have epilepsy. Sometimes I'm going to have a seizure. And most of the time they were pretty cool with it. There was a couple of kind of dickheads, but most people were like understanding and like, yeah, let me know if you have a seizure, then like we can talk about things, we can move things around. Most people are humans, but I think it's just the fact that you have to go and tell the individual professors instead of having the paperwork for you. That really like helps build your case. Makes it a lot harder.
I just think it's so wild that you had to fight for things that should just be a basic given right for you. And like, the thing is, right, is that we are all, as humans, all wired differently. We all have different disabilities, or maybe you're not disabled, maybe you just listen to this for fun, in which case, like, I'm so glad you're here and I'm so glad you're here to learn. But having to fight for something that makes your life easier, but because it doesn't fit into that normal, like, quote unquote status quo, average Joe blogs, it becomes challenging, is where we go so wrong in society, because we're not willing to help out those who are different. And that's where we see problems with internalized ableism, which we all know is rife. Ableism in general from the external forces, whether that be media, the public, whoever, having to just fight for like your basic stuff, it just shouldn't be a problem, and it just so is. And I think what you said again about it being, not visible to the naked eye is so important, because there is that stigma that because you can't see it, it doesn't exist, or like because you can't taste it, or because you can't smell it, like you can't see it, you literally cannot see it, so how can it exist? Which again is like, it's so messed up. Like it makes me so angry.
It's like that expectation that, like, if you're disabled, then you're just like, you're not able, you can't,
you can't do it,
and you can't do it. And so like there's this expectation of like, well, why either you're able to do stuff or you're not able to do stuff. And so like this accommodating you to like that doesn't, I don't understand that, because like either you can just do it as it's set up, or you can't do it at all and you're just unable to do anything. And like but that's just this like that's just not how the world works.
Like, there's no in between, there's no gray area.
And most of us live in this, like we live in this gray area. That's where so yeah,
absolutely wild. I think it's really important then to go on to how has your disability, or how has epilepsy impacted your career choices and the path that you went down? Because after hearing about your school experience, I think I'd want to set fire to everyone.
I definitely, I mean, like at school, I mean, I was always such a, like, I was like straight A student, like super studious. And then after epilepsy, school became a lot harder. It was just, I couldn't read as fast. I couldn't, I wasn't as, I was still, I was like a B, I was still really good, but I was an A and a B student, but I had to just try a lot harder to be where, like, before I was like flying through things, and I just had to really try a lot harder. And so that, like, I think where probably like before I don't know, who knows what they want to be when they're younger. Like, I don't know what I wanted to be.
Everyone wants to be a spaceman.
I think I just became really like angry at everything in general. And like I was just upset. And and then in university I ended up studying public health and just like going into healthcare. I think part of it was just like I've always wanted to like do good and make an impact, and then with my own experiences of like this just being so shit and like everybody having such a bad experience, then I wanted to kind of understand maybe how it worked better and how I could maybe make a better experience. And I didn't think, to be honest, like I didn't think I'd be able to like go to med school. It was just like my brain was not working that way. And I like, there was probably a part of me that was like, oh, that would be cool to actually like be a female amazing neurologist. And then I was just like, I just wouldn't be able to make it. Like I would if I tried really, really hard, and I just don't. That sounds exhausting. Because it's just not set up to accommodate me to do that. So so I studied public health to kind of study more around the system and go into health care as a field rather than that. So that's how I started my career, I guess.
I think it's really important though, because I think disabled people in general, they love to, the idea that we have to make something of ourselves to be a quote unquote good disabled person is actually something that's, it's a real problem within the disabled community. And I actually think there's great strength in being like, do you know what, as cool as it would be to be whatever it is, like you said, you could have been like this incredible female neurologist, but actually you would have to work so hard at that. It's not unattainable, but it's just a lot of hard work. And B, the system is not set up for you to not be perfect all the time, which, like, that's life, right? Like, no one's perfect all the time anyway. But being able to say, do you know what, it's just not for me, I would love to do it, but taking a step back and being like, actually, that would be cool, but that's not what I'm going to do. I think there's massive strength in that. I really, really do. Because as I said, I think we have this tendency as disabled people to put pressure on ourselves to be excellent or superior, to almost prove our disabled worth. Because, you know, for so long you're told you're seen as less than, and people don't believe that you can do things. So when you can do these crazy cool things and you can like prove that you're a good disabled person, or like you've done a good job as a disabled person, there's actually so much strength in being able to be like, actually, do you know what, it would be cool, but I'm not putting myself through it for everyone else. I'm just not doing
it. Yeah, no, it's true. I think like, and it's not to say like I am definitely pushing myself really hard, and it's just, there's some things that my brain just can't wrap around. It just doesn't work that way. And I think I used to get more, and sometimes I still like, I used to get frustrated and like sometimes, or sad, and sometimes I'll still reflect, like I'll reflect on it more rather than feeling it as much, of like, because it's like I used to love math and be really good at math, and I actually got into most universities for math, and then it just like, I can't really do math very well anymore. And obviously now it's been a while since I've done math, so like that's different. But it was just that's a bit different, but it was just like, things just got a lot harder. And it was just I tried to do, that was what I got into university for, and I just got there and I just couldn't do it. And it was a really hard decision at first, and I was at the time, like, you know, I was 18 and I was like upset and whatever, but then I also wanted to like make a difference, and so I wanted to do something that more tangible. So yeah, from there I went, I ended up but in the end, that was like too systematic for me. So I was like, oh, now I've gone too high. Now I got to go back down. I ended up doing like my master's in behavioral science, and that took me into working in like startups in health tech. So as a behavioral scientist, like designing engaging products in health techs, and so during like designing like 6-month diabetes management plans through text message, for example, and then I also worked in like ed tech, designing like large online courses that for like big universities around the world, and that was really cool. And I think there was a part of me that before the pandemic, because I graduated, just like I finished my master's before the pandemic, and I worked like a part-time job for a bit. And I remember thinking like I wanted to work remotely, because this was before remote was as big of a thing, but because I wouldn't really be able to do, it's either I have to work remotely or part-time, because I just couldn't go as much. It's like it's too much. But then with the pandemic, I was actually able to work a full-time job because it was remote. And so that's how I kind of got into this like startup space and dove myself into that, which is really fun. And now I actually have my own startup.
So exciting.
Yeah, I'm the founder of a startup called Beanbag Health. It's an app that supports recovery from eating disorders. We're about a year old now. We've been doing most, a lot of research and development, building it with so many people with lived experience. One thing about eating disorders that I guess is very similar to epilepsy is that you can't see it, really. It's not something you can see. And so a lot of people are hiding in secret and struggling with this in silence. We launched in February as well, focusing on like engagement and retention, which are some things that, I mean, how many times have any of us downloaded a health tech or like had downloaded an app and just like not used it the next week?
Yeah, so true. I always think about like my period tracker. I'll be great for like 2 weeks and I'll be like, meh, it's fine.
Yeah. So that's what we wanted to focus on. And so we did during our free trial, we just wanted to focus on like, how can we overcome that challenge? And people are using the app twice a day, every single day for like 20 weeks.
That's amazing.
So so we just kind of closed our free trial up. And we've been really excited about our results. So we take the most evidence-based treatment in a clinical grade app. So really excited about things. It's been an absolute wild ride, having my own startup and all of that.
Yeah, I bet. And like, oh, that's like, it's so great to hear you talk about it, because I think you're so right when you talk about retention, because we all have like really rubbish retention anyway. And that's like through our phones and media and whatever, like we don't have that ability to like, sometimes we all struggle to be consistent, right? And that's why consistency is such a big thing. But I love that, you know, like that's where you're going with this, is to be like, how can we make it as easy as possible to be as consistent as possible so that you get the best out of this? And like, I think that's just I just love that so much, because I think it's so needed, and I'm so excited to see how it progresses, because Lord knows it needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, like I guess, I mean, 98% of people with an eating disorder can't get access to the care that they need, which is just like wild. Yeah. And so it's hopefully this can provide support either directly to people or also be through the healthcare system as well. And so I think like I've had my own lived experience with eating issues, but that's like a seed of like the idea. I think it's there's just some people that struggle with it as well. And I think so many people have this, again, talking about stereotypes and what's in mind. So many people think of the like thin, white, anorexic teenager, but that's like such a minority of the people who struggle with it. Whereas most people are just like, you wouldn't recognize them because they're just day-to-day people, and they're struggling with body image and eating, and maybe they have a diagnosis, maybe they don't, but they're struggling with this on a day-to-day basis, and impacting their quality of life. And it's and they often might get turned away. They might not be at that like critical threshold to get the help in the traditional services. And so we're hoping to really make a difference there.
I love that so much. So I was wondering, do you have a piece of advice for a younger version of yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. What would my advice be to my younger self? Yeah, I mean, I guess like just take it easy. Like take it easy, enjoy.
Yeah.
It's like, don't stress as much. That's not really good advice. Don't stress, but things work out, I guess. That's not the best advice, but like take it easy, don't stress out. You don't need to go so fast. And like speaking to people is like probably gets you a lot further than gets you so much further than just like putting your head down and like going and like, I don't know, killing yourself over the work you're doing. Like put yourself out there, be authentic to yourself. Those are lots of different things.
I love that though, because I think there's so much to be said when you are younger. Like, we're not particularly old. I would still say I'm very much in my infancy still. But when you are like a teenager coming into your early 20s, you do just want to like go at full pelt all the time, regardless of what you're doing. And, you know, go it alone, because you don't really understand the idea of collaboration gets you a bit further than if you don't. But I think it's so, I just love that, being like, don't stress, like take it easy, like it will all work out, like don't worry about it. Because I think, you know, when you are that age, or you worry about like what's your career going to be like, and who are you going to marry, and where's that going to happen, and what's this person going to look like in your life, and actually just take it easy. Like your 20s are meant to be somewhat enjoyed, kind of. I mean, they're a crazy time for everyone, so like if you're going through craziness, don't feel like you're alone, because you're absolutely not.
Yeah, it's like you have time, like
Yeah.
it's take it easy, enjoy. I think, like, I don't, my grandma just turned 101 this year, and
Oh my
like
god.
like so like I think I look at her and I'm like, obviously time is not guaranteed at all, and so
Yeah.
but also like that's a lot of time. Like
Yeah.
a lot of time. And so I don't want to be just, and like I'm not saying I do this, like I'm not saying I don't do this. I guess like I still kind of like hustle and grind what more than I probably wish I do, but like
Yeah.
also I probably could have, like I look back and I'm like I could have just like chilled a bit, like to sit here, like take a gap year if you want, go for it. You can still, university will still be there, that play like that like a job will still be there, like explore your interests, like explore yourself. Chill out.
I think that's so, but I think that's such a good one, because we're like consistently told to always hustle super hard and have a side hustle and have like 700 side hustles, and if you're not doing what you love, then you're doing the wrong thing, and it's so bad for you. But actually, like, you do have time. You can just have like a couple of months to yourself. A couple of months might turn into a year. A couple of years might turn into 2 years. And if you don't know what you're doing right now and you feel like you're fumbling, like, it's probably the best thing for you, because at least you're figuring out what you do and you don't like. Like, don't feel like if you don't know what you're doing or what your passion is, that you're somehow not winning, because actually you are winning, because you're giving yourself this time to like explore all of your interests, and actually sometimes it's better to find out what you don't like before what you do like, because then at least you know what you're not going to go into. So I was wondering, through all the things that you've been through with your diagnosis, and then like coming to terms with epilepsy, but also in like your startup founder life, because I can just imagine how stressful that must be, is there a particular positive trait that you've noticed in yourself that actually, when you reflect on times that have been maybe a bit more challenging, you're like, I really handled that well, or I'm really proud of how I did that?
I mean, the first one that comes to mind is like resilience and just like keep going forward. But I'm not sure if that's the like I feel like there's another, like a better word that
Yeah.
like, because it's I don't like that very much. Like it's I guess like probably just like rolling with it. Like you know, like if things suck, like just kind of moving forward, and probably that, I think, whether that's in the startup, or whether that's in like I think getting used to the like, okay, not this again, and like rolling with the punches pretty much, and not just getting bogged down by it, and just like it's almost like in the startup it'd be like, okay, fail fast, it's not a failure, you learn from it and you move forward. And in life it's a similar thing, I think, with it's like, okay, that like now we're trying a new dose of this medication and we're going to see if it works, or like now it's not working and that's fine, or like, right, like learning more about how I'm still learning about how like my brain works and how I am feeling, and if it's related to the epilepsy. And like sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I'm slurring my words, did that like happen last night, I don't really know. And like, and I think it's just like kind of moving forward with like acknowledging it, learning from it, and moving forward. And that's like, I guess just keep moving forward.
I only have one final question for you, and I'm actually really sad that this is coming to an end because I really enjoyed today, because I've it's made me think in ways that I haven't thought about for a long time. But my question for you is, Lindsey, are you disabled and proud?
Yes, I'm disabled and proud.
Yay! Woohoo! Oh, I really enjoyed this conversation, particularly because epilepsy is not something that's like necessarily in my day-to-day. Disability is, but epilepsy isn't. And actually it's been so lovely to talk about the struggles that you've had with epilepsy, but also actually on the flip side, the things that it's brought into your life. And I think that it's been such a great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I've really appreciated talking about it, and I hope that some people appreciate hearing it.
Yeah. Oh, it's been so fun. I've loved it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey!